Hello everyone, my name is Brad Harker, and this is my Tribe Talk for Revolutionary Leader for the Raymond A. Mason School of Business at the College of William and Mary. I'm currently based at the U.S. Embassy in Beijing, China, where I serve as a Foreign Service Officer for the U.S. Commercial Service here at the U.S. Embassy. I live in Beijing, which is really an amazing city with its incredible amount of economic growth. It's the pulse of the country that is growing by leaps and bounds with new skyscrapers going up literally almost weekly, it seems. And it's also the cultural heritage center of the country with sites like the Great Wall and the Forbidden City that make the city a really special place to live. China, over the last certainly 30 years since the opening up in 1980, 30 to 40 years, frankly, has led the world in economic growth. This has created a lot of opportunity for the country as it has pulled hundreds of millions of people out of poverty, but has also resulted in a lot of challenges for the country, especially with respect to growing levels of environmental degradation. All of this is really a focus of the country's urbanization mandate, which is moving hundreds of millions of Chinese from the rural areas into cities. By 2030, it is estimated there'll be 23 cities in China over 5 million, and with 5 to 7 with cities over 20 million. All of this urbanization has required certainly incredible amount of infrastructure. So here's a good example of just the level of economic activity that Beijing has seen. Just Beijing, for example, has seen since 2000. Here's the subway in 2000, and then here it was at the end of last year. This doesn't take into account all of the highways. Here's 43 cities, for example, that are also developing metros plus high-speed rail. These trains go about 200 miles an hour and now connect the equivalent of Boston to Miami, west to Dallas, and north up to Chicago. So it's a real miracle of economic development that China has accomplished these last decades. The downside for this huge rush to increase their economic activity, and here's a slide which showcases that by 2025, the GDP of the country will meet or exceed that of the United States. But the downside really is the tremendous pollution crisis that has enveloped the country, especially in the last 10 to 15 years. So that is my wicked problem, which is economic development and the pollution that has come from China's breakneck economic development a requirement for social stability and for continued economic growth in the country. So the statistics are pretty staggering. Here's northern China on a clear day, and then when the pollution blows in from the south, it really blots out the sun. Here's a view from the top of the U.S. Embassy, and the same thing when the pollution gets really bad. It's unbelievable. So the impacts to the country are stark. Millions of Chinese die every year from impacts of pollution, and it has a major impact on the economic, as you can imagine, on the economy, ranging from sick days, hospital visits, the amount of costs associated with treating patients, etc. So what is the current situation and impact? Well, I brought this slide to show you the difference between a northerly wind and a southerly wind in Beijing. Southerly winds here in yellow blow in the pollution from south of Beijing, where huge industrial centers are. 350 is considered extremely hazardous on the AQI scale, and you can see the blue dots are the northerly winds, and you typically have much cleaner air. On a regional basis, China has here's just a really bad day in northern China, with many cities considered to be beyond index, which is 30 to 40 times what the World Health Organization considers good, which is below 50. So by comparison, in the United States, we have cities rarely will get above 50 on any given day. Here's a quick video that shows the pollution blowing in from the south last winter. This was over maybe a 3 or 4 hour period, and it's pretty stark. Or 20 minutes actually. And so 603 is considered really extremely hazardous and even beyond index based upon what the U.S. Embassy chart for pollution levels are, with again good being below 50. As I mentioned earlier, huge impacts. This is just recent that came out from the tremendous pollution that was impacting Delhi, but it also mentions the tremendous impacts that China has from air pollution, and it's particularly hard on the children. The forces and factors that are leading to the pollution crisis in China are many. First, many rural areas still rely on raw coal for cooking and heating. Second is the rampant production of energy from coal, not to mention the tremendous industrialization for raw materials such as concrete, aluminum, steel, petrochemicals. The lack of enforcement or little enforcement of environmental laws and regulations is also a determining factor. During my research, there are many cases where it's cited that the managers will turn off the expensive to operate pollution scrubbers during the day. At night, because they can save energy and because the authorities are not able to visibly see the pollution. So as a result, you see quite large spikes of pollution, particularly at night. Another factor is really economics. When you can open a factory in China and produce jeans, for example, where there are lax regulations, you don't have to treat the water, for example, from dyeing the jeans. And so those jeans are disproportionately less expensive than they would be if the factory had to meet the environmental regulations that you see in more advanced economies. There are many approaches to solve this problem, and in my approach is one of many, really, but I anticipate trying to develop a pollution summit in Beijing next fall that will focus really on the experiences that we have had in the United States to address our air pollution and environmental degradation problems that we had from the turn of the century really up until 1970 when we enacted the Clean Air Act. And since then, pollution levels have dropped by over 70% since 1970, not to mention our waterways are much, much cleaner. So again, with that as the backdrop, my proposal to help address the crisis of pollution in China is to convene a summit, a U.S.-China pollution summit, next June in Beijing that will really take a look at case studies. This is a picture of Pittsburgh circa 1970, which at the time was one of the most polluted cities in America. But today, after decades of focusing on environmental remediation and cleaning up the air, it is now a center for innovation in clean technology, clean coal technology as well. So it's just one case study that I believe that we should share and celebrate, not only to China but to the rest of the world, as to how a city can not only thrive but succeed economically by focusing on clean technology to clean up the environment. To execute this plan, first I'm going to work closely with American industry. The U.S. Department of Commerce estimates that the environmental technology market alone is worth some $63 billion in China. Together with the potential for expanded liquefied natural gas exports from China that can help replace coal-fired generation, I believe we've got a real opportunity to help balance the trade deficit while also providing major improvements for China and its pollution crisis. To do this, I will need to get buy-in, certainly from the U.S. and Chinese governments, to be able to convene a pollution summit. Thankfully, I've got a great team in Beijing, together with my colleagues at the U.S. Embassy, including the political section, the economic section, and the ambassador, who are also keen to help. And I've also reached out to the Paulson Institute. This is an NGO, a non-government organization that has been very active in developing action plans to help showcase areas where China can focus on reducing pollution. I've also reached out to the headquarters of the 2022 Winter Olympic Games that will be hosted in Beijing and in the northern areas of Beijing. And they have undertaken a massive renovation of what was an old steel mill, actually the largest steel mill in China in the Mao era, and converted into the headquarters of the 2022 Winter Olympic Games. So it's a real showcase of how you can take a very, very dirty facility and convert it into something quite amazing. And it's really a story that it would, I think, mesh very well with what we're trying to do with the Pollution Summit. So in conclusion, after 4 years, I'm ready for clean air. And I believe that with the right approach that is a win-win between the U.S. and China, where American companies can play a role in showcasing our technologies, especially pollution and in particular emission reduction technologies, we can begin to accelerate the trend line down even deeper for the reduction of pollution in northern China. I've done some analysis of our pollution in Beijing over the last several years, and here is, we are reducing, but I believe we can certainly do much better. And so we can go from days like this, which are far too many in Beijing, to what we experience much more so in the United States in this era, which is days that are often clear and blue sky, even in our most populated city centers, such as New York City and Washington, D.C., and cities like Pittsburgh, etc. So with that, I'd like to thank you for watching. It's been an incredible 2 years as we've gone through this MBA program together, and I thank you again for all of the experiences and the opportunities to share and learn from each other during this MBA program. Thank you very much.